Hello and welcome. This is Jeanette Gazella, founder and president of the International Association of Professional Life Coaches. And today we have our monthly masterclass. And this month it's the AHA solution to end self-sabotage with Mike Bundrant. And before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about Mike. He is the founder of INLP Center, which is a training center for coaches that want to learn NLP. And he's also an NLP master practitioner, INA fellow trainer, and retired psychotherapist. And Mike is also the book of Your Achilles Heel, Discover and Overcome the Hidden Cause of Negative Emotions, Bad Decisions, and Self-Sabotage. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Jeanette. Nice to be here.
Yes, well, we're glad to have you, and I know that I've already talked to several members who are anxious to hear what you have to say about self-sabotage. I think I could probably say that there's not anyone that hasn't, at some point in their life, committed self-sabotage to whatever degree, wouldn't you say so?
Amen to that. It seems to be a universal phenomenon, and I hope we have a unique perspective on it here today.
Yes, and so Mike's going to take you through his slideshow, and there's a chat room on the right of your screen. Feel free to type in any questions you have, and you're going to do a Q&A at the end of your slideshow, Mike?
Yeah, I'd love to do a Q&A at the end, and I also welcome questions throughout. On my screen here, I'm keeping the chat window where I can see it, so I welcome you and invite you to type in questions really at any time, and then I'll open it up to questions at the end, should you have any.
Okay, and if anyone could just write in there that you can hear us and see his slides, that would be helpful too. There's a little bit of a gap here, so we'll see. But just want to make sure that everyone can hear and see. Anyone? Yes, can hear and see. Okay, great. All right, so why don't we proceed, Mike?
Okay, thank you. So what you should be seeing here is a slide with a little plant in some soil in somebody's hands that says cultivating empowering beliefs. And this is actually the original title. I haven't changed out the slideshow presentation. The subtitle, How to Create Personal Freedom and End Self-Sabotage, is what this is all about. We have that will be our objective. So in more detail, our topics today: how beliefs relate to personal empowerment and self-sabotage, how deeper psychological attachments maintain cycles of self-sabotage, and this is really the area that we're going to focus on, what I like to call negative psychological attachments, the old familiar states and ways of being that get in our way, and yet we somehow manage to hang on to them over and over and over. And then we'll go over the AHA process, how to end the attachment cycle for greater personal freedom, choice, and success. So let's talk just briefly by way of introduction to what are beliefs. This probably isn't new material for anyone, but we're saying beliefs are your individual interpretation of what you see, hear, and feel in the outside world. So we'll distinguish between a fact and a belief. A fact, it's raining outside. The belief could be rain ruins all the fun. And the facts are perhaps less questionable or more objective. Beliefs are highly subjective. Rain ruining all the fun is very much a subjective interpretation. Fact, my father moved away when I was 7. Belief, I must not be lovable since my father moved away. Seems like that would be a common or even a natural way to interpret that, especially if you were a child. And yet it's still a belief, highly subjective kind of experience. So, why is this interpretation of the world important? Why is distinguishing between facts and belief really, really important? Well, because we tend to act upon what we believe. If we believe it's good to exercise and eat right, chances are we will exercise and eat right. Even though a lot of us believe, for example, it's good to exercise and eat right, but we don't exercise and eat right. And what's going on there? That's when we'll dive a little bit deeper. So let me give you an example of how this can play out. This is Scott. And like many people, Scott has dreams of a good life, family, children, nice little picnic by the lake, and so forth. And yet, Scott may have experiences in life where he felt unworthy or alone or destined to be alone. And those beliefs are happening within him at the same time. And so we see Scott, he wants to fall in love, he wants to start a family and be happy. And yet, at the same time, he has limiting beliefs. I'm unlovable. I will be left. I don't deserve to be happy. And so his limiting beliefs may or determine his limitation, his perceived limitations. And it's the limiting beliefs that so often win. And what we're really concerned about here is, why do we hang on to these limiting beliefs? If they're not working for us to give us what we want, why do we appear to be so attached to them? And that's really what we're trying to get at today. And this attachment to what doesn't work is what we call self-sabotage. It's when we unconsciously work against the things that we consciously want. Why would we ever do that? Why would we ever work against ourselves? Why would we ever make choices that give us the opposite of what we want? We do it all the time. What's going on there? This is actually a question that plagued me for 20 years as I worked with people and worked with myself. Why am I doing this right now? Why did I do that? I don't want it. And yet here we are. Self-sabotage. That's what we call it. So there's lots of ways to, I'll go through these quickly. There's lots of ways to address limiting beliefs. You can do inner work. You can, basically offer people a direct suggestion that they should do something or believe something differently. You can do immersion kinds of therapies and so forth, where you immerse yourself back into your childhood or what have you. You can do behavioral oriented approaches. And these are really common ways to address it. There's a concern, though, in any kind of work that you're doing, whether it's coaching or therapy or NLP or you name it, which is, if you're not getting at the root of the problem, but just the stem and leaves, then the weed will grow right back. These limiting beliefs I consider to be the leaves of the weed, and there is something else going on. And this is where we get into psychological attachments. So from here on out, we're going to talk about these psychological attachments, how they form, and so forth. But let me give you some of the characteristics of them. They're consistent. These are things that we expect to happen. They're developed in childhood. We're attracted to them in a strange way because they are familiar. We find some sort of safety in the familiar, and they typically operate on an unconscious level. So I know this is vague information here, but we're going to go into some specific examples of the three kinds of attachments. We have the control attachment, which is an attachment or a way of being in the world in which it feels like you are being controlled. Other people are controlling you. Circumstances are controlling you. And in some cases, your own desires are controlling you. And with a control attachment, we often feel helpless. There's also what we call the deprivation attachment, which is sort of a way of being in which we lack fulfillment, have a hard time knowing what we want, have a hard time expressing our desires, have a very hard time expressing our needs. We're not directly seeking happiness and fulfillment. We're kind of cruising along and not addressing our inner needs. And then there's the rejection attachment, which is a feeling of a lot of self-esteem issues are related to the rejection attachments, a feeling of not being good enough, a feeling of being an outcast, feeling that you don't fit in, or that other people don't like you, or that nothing you do is good enough. And so I want to give you some examples of these kinds of attachments. Let's start with the control attachment. Let's say that you grew up in a family in which you had very controlling parents. You feared breaking the rules. And you had to toe the line. Maybe all of your decisions were made for you. Maybe when you broke a rule or decided that you were going to think for yourself, that you were punished. And so, in a way, being controlled in that way and not allowed to sort of develop your own independence was won the day for you as you were having your formative experiences in life. Now, one of the things that would happen is that you wouldn't like being controlled. In fact, you may hate it. You may rebel against it, or you may resign yourself to it, but resent it. But on a deeper level, subconsciously, you depend on being controlled. You might not have developed the independent decision making skills to take charge of your own life. So, this reminds me of someone uh, who, a man who got married and who had this kind of control attachment, and his wife was pretty much in charge. And he described a scenario that went like this. She would say, "Hey, we're getting ready, we're going out to dinner, and we're going to leave in a half hour, so get ready." And then he'd sit there on his laptop and not get ready. He didn't want anyone telling him what to do. He didn't like being controlled. And so he wouldn't get ready, and she'd remind him, and he wouldn't get ready. And finally, she'd get upset and say, "Get up right now, get ready, quit screwing around." And he would get up and he would get ready and put on a junky shirt and shorts and flip flops, not at all ready to go out for the evening. And she would become even more upset. And in his mind, he would be saying to himself, "There she goes again, trying to control me. I can wear whatever I want to, wherever I want to go, and do whatever I want to, and nobody can tell me what to do." Now, if you take this in his mind and isolate it and say, okay, are those thoughts true? Yeah, they are true. And yet he agreed to go out to dinner. He agreed that they would be going out to a nice dinner. It's appropriate to dress up a little nicer when you go out to a nice dinner. So they go out to the nice dinner, and he starts to drink, and he starts to drink a little too much. And there she is again saying, "You know what? We're out to a nice dinner. We're with friends. You're starting to slur your speech. And what's going on? What do I have to do to get through to you?" And of course, He's resentful. I can drink. I'm controlling myself. And there she goes again. She's trying to run my life. So what happens with a control attachment, you end up with these beliefs. And these beliefs, again, think of the leaves of the weed. Women are controlling. It's no use trying to do what I want. I'm trapped. However, if you look at the situation and whether or not this man set himself up to be controlled, you can find several things that seem to be problematic. For example, if you are going to go out, it's appropriate to get dressed appropriately, to get dressed on time. If you're going to go out to a nice dinner, it's appropriate not to drink too much, not to act out, and all of these kinds of things. So what happens with the control attachment is we hate being controlled, and at the same time, our behavior suggests that we need to be controlled. We are inviting control into our lives through our decisions. And we're justifying that. And we're hanging on to sort of this constant invitation to other people to control us. So if you look at let's say you're a manager at work and you line up 10 employees and 9 of those employees basically do their jobs, get help when they need it, help each other, and they're great employees. And one of those 10 employees, however, is a rebel, hates being controlled, doesn't like being told what to do. Now, as a manager, which employee are you going to intervene with the most? Which employee are you going to micromanage? Which employee are you going to need to control? Which employee is inviting more attention and oversight and guidance and so forth? Well, the rebellious employee. So with a control attachment, and the rebel style is only one way to manifest a control attachment. There are other ways. But with the control attachment, the whole point here is that by virtue of our behavior, we're inviting more control into our lives. We're inviting other people to have to monitor us. Then we're resenting that monitoring. And yet the deeper issue is that at some deep level, we apparently need to be controlled, and we're inviting what we hate the most into our lives. So the control attachment is one example of a self-sabotaging way of being in the world. And I hope that I am making sense with this, and would invite any questions that you have about it as we move forward. There's another kind of attachment, and that's what we call the deprivation attachment or the self-deprivation attachment. This often occurs when we grow up with unmet needs, and so you have a child that whose parents are emotionally unavailable or physically unavailable, and sort of grows up with the television as the babysitter, and her needs aren't fulfilled on a regular basis. And so she feels empty or she feels unimportant. She consciously wants to feel loved and fulfilled, and yet subconsciously doesn't want her needs to be met. In other words, when I say doesn't want, maybe she did not develop the skills to ask for what she needs, to make her needs known, and or that even that it's okay and normal to have your needs met. So she will perhaps be more comfortable when her needs are not met, because that's what she grew accustomed to. And so she goes and she marries a man, and it was really, really wonderful when they were dating and so forth. But soon after she got married, he got a job and got all into work, and started spending the majority of his time either at work or coming home and working some more. And she feels deprived. She feels not connected. She asked herself, can't he see what I need? And yet, even though her friends may say, listen, you need to go and tell him what he needs to do and what you need and so on and so forth, she didn't do that. And so this is a deprivation attachment that is operating. She has grown so accustomed to her needs not being met and either didn't have the skills or the awareness or the sense that it's okay to ask for what she needs. Now, a lot of us, when we're in that situation, we turn to other sources to get our needs met, and often those sources um, are inherently not they're not good for us. In other words, they don't actually meet our needs in any sort of a fulfilling way. And this is what this woman did. She turned back to television and to eating as a way to fulfill or fill the emptiness inside her. However, there's nothing about television or eating that actually meets her human need for fulfillment. And so her limiting beliefs might be, I can't expect others to satisfy my needs. I don't matter. Men are jerks. I can't get what I want, and so forth. But at the same time, she is not expressing her needs. She is not considering her needs important. And she is not taking responsibility to ensure that her needs are met and informing the people around her where she's at. So she's kind of gliding along and not addressing her need. People with deprivation attachment generally do have a fear or an inability to express their own needs. So this is another type of attachment that creates a self-sabotaging way of being in the world. And many of my clients, and of course myself as well, we don't realize that this is what we're doing. We're sort of going along on autopilot with these attachments being fulfilled day in and day out, and we don't really wake up to what's going on. My wife Hope had this kind of situation, and as we were developing the AHA Solution program, which is our online program that goes into much greater detail about self-sabotage and the different kinds of psychological attachments, she made a video of a breakthrough that she had with it along the lines of deprivation attachment. And if I can get the technology to work, it's a short video. I will play it for you in a few minutes. Let's go over the third and final attachment with an example. It's called the rejection attachment. Often people who have an attachment to rejection grew up being rejected or criticized. And in a funny kind of way, if there were a bully in their life, they were sort of seeking the bully's approval and not getting the bully's approval, but still going after that approval only to be rejected again and again. Consciously, nobody likes rejection. Nobody does. And yet subconsciously, if we have a rejection attachment, we find ways to invite criticism and rejection into our life, not by conscious choice, but we set ourselves up for it unconsciously. A common example of this is to have an inner critic or a self-critical voice playing like a tape all day long in your mind. That would be one manifestation of a rejection attachment. It's telling you, oh, you want to do that? Well, you're not good enough to do that, and you're going to fail, and things aren't going to turn out right, and nobody likes you, and you're worthless. that is a rejection attachment. Sometimes we have a really hard time with these voices that tend to just be on autopilot. And we think, well, how did that get there? Why am I having to deal with that voice in my head all the time? And we often believe that voice and sort of give it authority and fear it and react emotionally to it as if it were a universal truth. And that is how powerful these psychological attachments can be. So let's say this boy grows up being bullied by his older brother and desperately wants his older brother's approval. He never gets it. And what he gets is more rejection and criticism and hurt and so on and so forth. He may grow up wanting approval. He may grow up wanting to feel like people love and respect and admire him. And however, he may go overboard trying to get it. Let's say that he meets a girl and he starts dating her in high school, and he's so afraid of the rejection that he goes overboard and he smothers her, and he's bringing her flowers every day, and he's constantly asking her how she's doing, and he's texting her 10 times an hour. And this is the kind of behavior that might drive your girlfriend away because she doesn't have any space. And his rejection attachment is in the driver's seat in this situation. It's creating an insecurity, it's creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. And he may not be aware at all. He may be just saying, why don't people like me? I'm not bad. I try really hard. And yet he may be doing all kinds of things unconsciously that invite others to distance themselves from him. This is a really common one with social anxiety. It's like, okay, I get invited to go to a party or what have you, and I immediately think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to fit in there. There's my rejection attachment. And I have this image in my mind of walking into the party and people not liking me, looking down their nose at me. There's my rejection attachment, predicting rejection. I walk into the party and I'm scanning for evidence that people aren't going to like me. I'm feeling nervous. I'm feeling insecure. And I notice somebody turn their head real quick and glance at me, then look away. And I interpret that as, oh my gosh, they saw me and they turned away and they're not interested in me. And I clearly don't fit in here. And all of this is based on an interpretation, seeing the world through my rejection attachment. It can be very embedded, very much on autopilot. And I might go through that party feeling very insecure and not really taking the risk of connecting with people, not relaxing, not being myself. And people are going to find it very difficult to connect with me. And I'll leave that party going, see, there it is. People don't like me. And now my rejection attachment is fulfilled. So, rejection, attachment, limiting beliefs might be I'm unlovable. I'm not good enough. I will always be alone. Those are the kinds of things. And we can try, if we have a rejection attachment, we can try really, really hard to do things for others and to connect with them. But it's really hard when we're projecting all of this rejection for people to reciprocate and really connect with us. So these attachments, the control, deprivation, and rejection attachment, the solutions, the behavioral solutions for them are the easy part. In other words, if you have a control attachment, behave in age appropriate ways, be more responsible, really take charge of yourself and be responsible, meet people's expectations, meet your own expectations, and so on and so forth. The deprivation attachment, again, the solution, the behavioral solution is fairly simple. Tell others what you need from them. If you're not getting what you need, then make your needs known. Some people may respond very, very well to that. Other people may not respond well to that. Now you know you have someone who clearly knows what you need, who's not interested in providing it. Now you know that you can make future decisions based on that reality. The rejection attachment: do things that encourage self respect and acceptance by others. When you go to a get together of people, be yourself, be warm, connect with people, ask questions, share things about yourself. Now, all of these things, of course, are easier said than done. If you have a deprivation attachment, it's really, really hard to express your needs. It's really hard not to just take on the burden um, of one of the sort of reminds me, one of the styles of the deprivation attachment in the AHA solution is what we call the martyr. This is the person who does all the work and doesn't ask for help, and feels deprived or feels resentful and empty inside because there's nobody else contributing. Well, when you have that going on, you can be so attached to it, to the point where people ask you if you need help and you say no. You turn the help away because you're really attached to the idea that you're the one that has to do everything. When you have a rejection attachment, and I say, well, go into the party and be warm and be yourself and just talk with people and it'll all work out. Nobody's out to get you. Nobody thinks poorly of you. But when you have a rejection attachment that's on autopilot, that's really hard to pull off. Uh, really hard to pull off, almost as if you don't know how, you don't have control over your thoughts and your emotions, and it just sort of takes over. And again, it's really, really deep stuff. But these are the behavioral solutions to them. And now let's look at this whole attachment cycle. Sort of try to put it all in perspective. Deep negative attachments formed in childhood. That's the top of the cycle here. Number one. The attachments, number two, manifest negative feelings, beliefs, and behaviors. Number three, we can't achieve what we consciously want because of self-sabotage. In other words, I want to go to the party and just connect with people. I want to be able to have my needs met, and so on and so forth. I consciously want those things, but unconsciously, I'm actually driven in a different direction. And that's the self-sabotage. When we grow so accustomed that things are a certain way, we are kind of driven to maintain that familiarity. Number four, we may try to change without recognizing our deeper attachments. And now these very powerful ways of being, we're trying to behaviorally modify them. And that can work. However, that's sort of the idea that you take someone with a lot of social anxiety, which is a rejection attachment, and say, just go be yourself at a party. It's easier said than done. We may try it, we may fail at it, and that's where we kind of remain in this cycle of hopeless self-sabotage. Well, we have a process that we've developed that we call AHA. It's an acronym, and it's a process that stops the attachment cycle. And I want to review that process with you. The first step, and always this is the hardest step, is to be aware. Notice your negative thought process and action, and that really should say, notice your negative attachment. Notice what you seem to be driven toward unconsciously. In other words, notice what's programmed into you. So if I have a rejection attachment, again, I'm going to the party and I can stop and say, you know what? I have rejection programmed into me. When I go to this party, I don't know people there. They don't know me. There is actually no reason for them to reject me or to think poorly of me. However, in my mind, I am completely anticipating that that's what's going to happen. That's what's programmed in. Unconsciously, I'm seeking rejection. Unconsciously, I'm creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of rejection. This is the programming. When you put it that way, it's a very strong statement, because the last thing on earth that would make any sense to us is that we're seeking rejection, or that we're seeking to be deprived, or that we're seeking to be controlled. And consciously, we are doing none of those things. Unconsciously, there's a script or there's a program running that really is driven toward those negative things, which is the only way we would ever sabotage ourselves. If we go back to that question, why would anybody do anything at all to sabotage their success, to sabotage their well-being? Well, it's because a part of them, usually an unconscious part, is actually seeking that out. A part of them is programmed to move toward that. A part of them is believes that that's the way the world is, that that's what's supposed to happen. And in a funny kind of way, that's a good thing, because that's what's familiar. And I often say and remind myself that we would all choose a familiar misery over a foreign happiness every single time. We crave, we find pleasure in what's familiar. If what is familiar is being controlled, deprived, and rejected, that doesn't change anything with the familiarity effect. If that's what's familiar, then that's what we're more comfortable with. And we will, at some level, seek out what we're comfortable with. And we typically bury that whole script. And of course, we have conscious dreams and desires and things we want and ways that we want to be different. But if we're fighting against this deeply unconscious script, it's really, really hard to win. So the first step is be aware of the script, be aware of the attachment. The second step is to stop, step back, and consider your options. So when you're aware of the script running, then stop what you're doing and saying, my self-sabotage script is running. I'm sitting here right now in my desk thinking that my boss hates me. Okay, I don't have any evidence that my boss hates me, but I'm sitting here thinking that. This is my rejection attachment. This is my tendency to seek out rejection, to look for evidence of rejection, to create a self-fulfilling prophecy of rejection. That's been programmed into me, and I'm sitting here ruminating on that. So I'm going to stop that and consider the options. Do I need to continue to think this way? Do I need to distract myself? Do I need to go talk to my boss? What can I do right now? What are my other options other than running this self-sabotage script? And then, of course, the final is to act, consciously choose the most empowering option available to you. And I know this acronym, AHA, it's cute. It's absolutely true. And once again, it's not always as easy as being aware, halting, and acting on new information. In other words, that doesn't necessarily happen the first day. But here's what I find in my coaching practice is that when these deeply embedded scripts, when we confront them, when we go through the aha process with them and really get clear with the awareness of what's going on, 6 months seems to be the magic number. After a period of time really addressing these, something really incredible happens, which is they just dissipate. They just go away. And now I'm sitting here at my desk and I'm not ruminating about my boss hating me. I'm walking into the party and I'm not predicting rejection. I'm not bent toward rejection. I'm making dinner plans with my wife and I'm going, hey, we're leaving in a half hour. I'm going to start getting ready. And she never has to tell me or try to take control or monitor me. This kind of change absolutely happens. It doesn't necessarily happen immediately. Although I have had examples of it. People go, you mean I'm actually seeking these things? There's actually a part of me that, in a funky kind of way, wants these things? It's like, yeah, how could there not be? This is what you were taught happens. This is part of how you became the person you are. These are the messages that you received. How are you not going to come to that conclusion? And of course, it's a very, very uncomfortable conclusion. And so we avoid it, we distract ourselves from it, and we consciously dream of other things that we want to have in our lives. At the same time, unconsciously, the script is running that sabotages those dreams. And that's where a lot of us find ourselves. So I'll become aware, and not just aware at a superficial level, but it's really aware that you're seeking out this particular thing that you don't want. You're setting yourself up for it. If I have a rejection attachment, I might again and again and again get in relationships with the wrong people where I get hurt. And I fool myself into getting into these relationships. It's like, oh, well, I can change this person. It's not going to happen again. If I act better, if I insist that things be differently, I fool myself into telling myself it's going to be different this time, choose the same kind of person, ignore all the same red flags, and get hurt again. That's a rejection attachment. Some of these patterns are pervasive and they're confusing. We end up consciously blind to what's really going on and saying, why is this happening to me? It's really hard. It takes a lot of maturity and oftentimes a lot of work just to get to the point where you say, I'm seeking this stuff out. I'm setting myself up. And then to desire something different for yourself that might be a lot happier, but a lot less familiar. These are all, this is all part of a transformation where you can move from a self-sabotaging way of being to a more fulfilling way of being. And that's what the aha process, and that is what the aha solution is all about. So our program with the AHA solution is at inlpcenter.org. It's actually an online program where we've taken the 3 attachments, control, deprivation, and rejection, and we've broken them each down because we find there are 4 primary styles that are the manifestations of each kind of attachment. So there are 12 attachment types. There is a video to explain not only the whole program and the foundation of it, but a video to explain each of the 12 attachment types. There are worksheets that help you work through the AHA process given your attachment type. And so we've sort of developed this as an independent study program where you can begin to identify, become aware of, halt, and act on new information, choose the most empowering option when it comes to your self-sabotage. This is my favorite topic in the whole world. In fact, my private coaching practice serves people who have identified with this concept. We have at inlpcenter.org to get onto one of our newsletters, which traffic usually comes from guest posts that I write in different places, where people watch a 20-minute presentation that is somewhat similar to the presentation that I gave today. They watch that video, and that's where my coaching clients come from. My coaching practice tends to specialize in self-sabotage because it was my issue for so many years, and still is in many ways in an ongoing way. But it was a really difficult issue for me and a confusing one for so many years. And now that I've sort of figured out why it happens and how to stop it in my own life, I became very excited to help other people do the same. So I know my background is NLP, and we train 500 students a year and with NLP certification, but we've made the AHA solution the underpinnings of it all. Because when you learn any kind of strategic intervention, and that's what NLP is, it's a strategic intervention, there's lots of instances when it doesn't work. And when you go to the training room, it seems like it works just fine. Then when you get in the office with a client, it doesn't always work the way it worked in the training room. People don't, at the same time, they tell you they want change. And so you get all excited and you set the goals and you set up your accountability system and you give them stuff to do, and they come back the next week with nothing but excuses about why they didn't do it. Why don't people do what's best for them? This is our answer to that question. And so I use that introductory video on our website to screen clients. People who see themselves in that video end up being the ideal client for me. They'll get a lot out of it. And it's just the kind of person that I want to work with. So if you go to inlpcenter.org, you can read about the AHA solution, the self-sabotage program. If you end up purchasing it, there is a secret discount code that you can use. That the discount code is VAK, Victor Alpha Kite, VAK10. And that will give you a discount on any program that you purchase at the INLP Center. It's inlpcenter.org. So I don't know, Jeanette, how I'm doing on time. Seems like we're down to the last few minutes. I hope you all found the presentation interesting. I hope there was something in it for you, and I am happy to answer any questions. Although as I look in the chat window, it seems like there are some people that this couldn't hear or that this wasn't.
Yeah, there were some people who couldn't get in. Thank you. This was a great presentation, Mike, and very thorough. And I thought I'd just throw out a couple questions.
Yeah.
So you said that. So you walked us through 3 of the different types of attachments that people could have, and so once you identify, so sounds like, first of all, what you do is help people identify what attachment they have, first of all, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And there are 12 different ones. And then once you identify what your attachment is, then you said that you look at the options that you have. Once you're, of course, that means you're aware of it. So could you just give us an example of how you would help someone see what kind of options they have when they're in the moment and need to shift their thinking in order to overcome this attachment?
You bet. Once people have identified the attachment type, so let's say that it's me, I'm the client, and I realize I have this control attachment that that my wife is sort of constantly telling me what to do. She's constantly nagging me, and it feels like she's trying to control me. And the realization, the aha is that I'm setting myself up for that. That's the awareness that is the breakthrough. Um, and most of all, why am I doing that? Why am I setting myself up? But I might look at my behavior and say, okay, well, what are the things she nags me about? She nags me about taking out the trash. She nags me about chores around the house. She nags me about balancing the checkbook. She nags me about getting ready to leave on time. She nags me about spending more time with the kids. This woman nags and nags and nags. And if I realize I have a control attachment, I'm setting myself up for that, I'll also realize, or potentially realize, that these 5 things that I just rattled off that she nags me about, these are things that I typically don't do proactively. If I actually took charge rather than letting her be in control, if I were proactive about it, would that then take away her motivation to nag? In other words, the realization is by neglecting my responsibilities, I am encouraging and inviting her to monitor me. Now, why would I ever do that? And the control attachment explains it. That may be what's most familiar to me, even though I don't like it. That may be what I'm seeking. And when I realize that by neglecting my responsibilities, I'm seeking out this thing that I don't like, that's the aha. And so it would start out, the intervention might start out with, my homework might be, okay, today I know there's a part of me that is going to want to neglect my responsibilities and invite my wife to nag me. And I'm going to realize that as I consider the things that I have to do every day, there's going to be a part of me that's going to want to avoid doing those things until I get nagged to death about them. And so I might give a client I'm an assignment to say, when you get up in the morning, have written down on a 3x5 card, today I secretly want to be nagged. And to look at that, and it's a very confrontive thing. It's like, I secretly want to be nagged. On a typical day, I would neglect enough of my responsibilities that I would ultimately end up being nagged. That's kind of the result that I ended up getting by avoiding my responsibilities. Um, that's what I set myself up to get. And so, in some cases, I will have clients write down a very confrontive statement. This is what I'm looking for today. I'm going to catch myself today to see how many times I set myself up to be nagged. And it just opens up, it's very eye opening. Or if you're working on rejection, today I'm going to look for every last ounce of evidence that I'm being rejected. Today, I'm going to interpret everything as a rejection. And then I'll catch myself all day long doing these interpretations. Oh, somebody passed by me in the hall and didn't say hi. I feel rejected. They obviously don't like me. All the different ways that I am programmed to interpret the world as a rejection, now they're just going to stand out to me. And when I realize this is what I'm doing, that opens the opportunity to do something different. We can't have conscious choice about behaviors and tendencies that are operating on an unconscious level. So big awareness is sort of what we're going for in the beginning. When I realize this is what I'm seeking, only then does it become possible to do something else. So back to the control attachment, I'm going, hey, I'm setting myself up to be nagged. I come across, like, there's a trash, it's full. Normally, I would just ignore it until she nags me to take it out. Do I want to do that? Do I want to invite more control into my life? Yes or no? No, no, I can do without the control. I didn't realize I had been pushing it like that for so long. Now I'm going to take out the trash. So it's that kind of high expanded awareness sort of intervention that's common with this work. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And so then you sort of illuminate certain options that people have as far as how they're thinking about it, and then they have to act on them, like taking out the trash.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It's interesting that if it's interesting the choice people make. People sometimes still have a hard time. I know if I don't take out the trash, she's going to nag me. That's what I complain about. That's my self-sabotage, and then they won't take out the trash still. It's like it's interesting how attached we actually are to some of these things. But I find over time, with continued awareness, at some point people start to go, you know what, I'm tired of it. I do have a choice. Um, I can I can envision something different for myself, and it really is better. And it's a lot less hassle to just take out the trash than end up in a fight and where I feel controlled. So the shift absolutely does happen, but at the same time, in the beginning, we're usually pretty deeply attached to the negative outcomes, unfortunately.
Now, Mike, what about a different kind of situation? I've talked to quite a few coaches who feel like they're somehow sabotaging their business,
Mm-hmm.
even though, they don't know how or why.
Uh-huh.
And so, what kind of things can they do to discover, to become aware of what exactly,
What's going
they're
on?
doing? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the common things, ways that I use to kind of diagnose what's going on is I ask, what outcome are you getting? We know it's not the one you want, but what outcome are you getting? And it's like, well, I have this vision for my coaching practice where I want to build it and 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 make money and really help people. That would be very, very fulfilling. Okay, what outcome are you getting? Well, I'm not fulfilled. I'm still going to my dead end job, and I feel kind of like my life doesn't have the kind of purpose that it
Or they've
needs.
started their coaching business and they don't have any clients.
They don't have any clients. Okay, and so um, it's sort of like we could break that down even further. Say, well, do you know the things you need to do to get clients? Well, I need to write articles. I need to offer free sessions. I need to do these things. I need to, pay attention to the marketing lessons I'm getting from IAPLC and so on and so forth. And I need to act on those things. So sometimes we'll have to break down when it's time to act on those things. What happens? And I get really specific at that point, and they go, well, honestly, I get a voice in my head that says, you're not good enough. Who are you to be a coach for other people? So now we go, okay, there's a critical voice, and they're anticipating that they're going to fail because they're not good enough. And what right do you have? And so forth. And now I'm starting to see rejection. They're rejecting themselves. And so we're sort of in, as you get more and more specific, you start to figure out what is going on in their minds specifically, and where does that fit into this in terms of finding out what's going on. Any situations, like I have my coaching practice, it's not going where I want to be. Well, if you think in terms of how the self-sabotage is manifesting, it could be anything. It could be a control, a rejection, or a deprivation attachment. It sort of depends on what's going on inside the person that is causing the obstacle.
And could a person have more than one attachment
Yeah,
type?
yes, of course. I think we all to one degree or another have all of them. It's one of the common things I get when people, start coaching with me. They watch the video and they go, you know what? I have all of them. Yeah. Yeah, me too. We all do. And the question is, can you become aware of it? Can you stop what you're doing and can you do something else? And that's really saying a lot. Sometimes it takes months to really work these things out, because they're so embedded within us. But it is very common to have more than one. And we usually work at one at a time, however. We don't try to tackle them all, work at one at a time. And sometimes working through one reveals another one, and we're peeling the onion. But it's really deep and powerful and transformative work. It's not just I've decided to do different behaviors. It's we really begin to see the world in a different way. And to me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think that this is a good way to show how this interfaces with the law of attraction, really, because we know from that everything that we have in our life is something that we attracted, and yet everybody gets all upset. Well, I didn't attract that. But the whole concept of the self-sabotage sort of shows us that yes, we are attracting that, and here's how we're attracting it.
Yeah, that's the part that's kind of tough as nails, and it's the part that I have the most challenge communicating, because it's not good news. It's like, well, there's a part of you that's seeking out negative things and is so expert at finding those negative things and is so expert at convincing you that you're not seeking anything like that out and that it's not your fault. So you'll leave it alone so it can continue to seek out the negative things. That's a hard message to deliver. And yet, if we will sort of open up to it and realize that's what's going on in many cases, it's incredibly freeing. We can detach from all of that. And that's why I keep delivering that message.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Now, are there any other questions from anyone else that's here today before we wrap this up? Just type it into the chat. And I know there's a little gap with these Hangouts, so we'll wait a minute. Is there anything else then that you'd like to share with us, Mike, as a parting thought?
Parting thought. I don't have any profound parting thoughts for you. However, I invite anyone to go to the iknowpeacecenter.org. My contact information is there. If you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer an email or a phone call from you. And I really appreciate you, Jeanette, for having me on board today, and all of you who attended or who may be listening to this online. I wish you the very, very best.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, Mike, for sharing this with us. And thank you, listeners, for attending our class today.